What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel, Anime Fiction. I am back with another episode of What If Naruto was teleported to another world, part 12. And if you did enjoy this video, like this video for the next part. And if you're new to my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 14 Naruto flew backwards from the sheer force of the punch he parried, heading straight for the wall. He spun in midair until his feet landed against the stone wall, grunting in pain as his feet slammed into the brick. But that didn't stop him, not even for an instant. He used that strength to push himself off the wall, hurling himself against the armor with a mighty yell as his swords remained at his side. Kichio readied himself with his mace at the ready, parrying the various blows that landed on the stone as the boy howled with a wild roar. As Naruto made a dozen deep scratches against the weapon and slashed the guardian's hand, he still found no evidence that his attacks had done any real damage to the being. As the armor struck a mighty blow at the wizard in the air, the boy's form vanished as the full blow came to an end. But Kichio knew it wasn't that easy when he turned to see the boy holding on to the mace as he pierced our swords. He drew the blades of his blunt weapon and leapt out, swinging both swords in the space where the armor's head and chest met in an attempt to decapitate the creature. Their swords dug into the rock, but he was stopped by his resistance. He growled and drew his swords before the sensitive rock could flatten him with its palm. The armor tripped, but he used that strength to twist and grip the mace with both hands. Naruto landed and anticipated the attack, keeping both swords on guard to the left and leaning on his mace. He grunted with the sheer effort as his feet skidded across the gravel, pushing away bones and debris. Naruto lost his balance and was pushed back by the attack. He slid back a few feet before feeling his head spin with the force of that latest attack. He spat blood into his mouth before wiping his chin and watching the huge rock move. This thing was strong. Like very, very strong. Definitely one of the physically strongest creatures he had ever fought. Of course, that was to be expected when fighting a piece of living stone. That bat could easily smash it into another one of those fancy blobs on the wall. For a rock, he was surprisingly quick when it came to getting back into a defensive position to block his punches. And of course, it was difficult to break through this solid rock when you had to be careful with attacks. And finally, I must say, little evil bastard, you have very nice moves. It was loud and annoying as hell. Naruto turned away as he felt his arm ache from blocking all of this guardian's movement for the past 15 minutes. He let out a reassuring sigh as he tried to hold the fight long enough to regain some strength. He looked down at the sentient rock. Can I ask you a question real quick? Sure. Shoot. Why are you so eager to kill me? Is every word that comes out of your mouth, I guess, a death threat to crush me or a very bad joke? My pranks are not so bad. This is very rude of you. The guard started waving his arms in protest and stamped his feet on the floor, making the whole room shake. The blonde boy only wore a tired and annoyed expression as he slightly lost his balance. I want to know, those are all the original KICHIYO brand comedy golden lines I counted on. The best of the best I think of while I was here. Naruto's forehead twitched at the sight of this supposedly ancient armor throwing a tantrum like a child. I don't care. Answer the question, he yelled back. Okay. You know what, you're a chicken. Kichio relaxed, leaning on his worn club like an armrest, rubbing his non-existent chin. Show me. Can you use your inner voice, please? Naruto said as he covered his ears from his constant abuse. My god, it was like spending an entire afternoon with Natsu and Happy after they got soaked. I would not make that mistake again. Well, I always had to make sure no one comes here to steal swords, and my orders were to make sure that no living beings come here to steal the swords. Kill them. Naruto made no change in his expression. Why? Because that's what I've always done. I've been made here, I've lived here, I've kept this place from here for centuries. This is my purpose. I must keep this place till the fall. Naruto shifted his view to the side, considering what he had said. But I didn't come here to get swords. Then why are you fighting me? Because you can lie. Deception. Even if you say you didn't come here for the blades, that doesn't mean you won't be guided by the influence that blades have. Kichio threw the mace over his shoulder as he faced the blonde wizard who had infiltrated the sanctuary. So I will protect this entry from all intruder, at all costs. Naruto just stared at the towering statue with a dazed look as he still couldn't figure out the bigger problem at hand. Then why are you just attacking me? Those other guys who passed you are the ones who want swords. Why didn't you try to stop them? The mustachioed boy yelled irritably. They pointed their swords against the entrance. Oh yes. Those guys were the heroes. The heroes? Said the boy. Yeah. Those were the guys WHO said I had gone protect the swords from you, the bad. I'll have to go kill them after I'm done with you, but I still think these guys are pretty awesome. Naruto looked absolutely stunned as the most he could do in his situation was stare at Kichio in disbelief and slowly shake his head. Okay, Let me get this straight. A bunch of shady guys came here first, flashing their massive stash of weapons and giving a damn when you apparently crushed their teammates. He guessed from the 2 fresh red spots around him. And then when you said you should kill them, they accused me of being the culprit and you let them go. Didn't it occur to you that maybe they were the bad guys and were lying to you? Absolutely. Heroes don't lie. They can't. How stupid can you be? Naruto yelled at the top of his lungs. Stop talking. Kichio charged forward and swung his mace. Naruto leapt back as the weapon hit the ground. He charged again and the two shared a quick exchange of gunfire as sparks flew in all directions. Naruto gritted his teeth as the force of each of the deflected blows came close to knocking the swords out of his hands. He used both blades to parry a full side attack while moaning from the force exerted. He yelled and thrust the bat back, spinning the keeper around and trying to hit his back with centripetal force. Naruto leapt over the incoming object and lunged at his enemy's feet. Both swords were extended to the right side as he held them tightly. Tower cutter. Kichio's right foot was cut in two when the guard howled and landed sideways. He tried to strike Naruto again, but the boy escaped his reach. But before he could dive in for a second attack, the rock man dropped to his knees and looked back at the boy. Naruto clicked his tongue. Even when he was handicapped, this guy wouldn't stop chasing him. He could run now and try to get to the group of Ronin before it was too late, but this guy would probably fight his way towards them. And if he was going to get into another fight, he didn't want to be double-teamed with multiple weapon users and a sturdy hunk of rock. So he looked up at the great walls and ceiling that surrounded him. He chuckled as a quick distraction occurred to him. He leapt into a horse stance and threw his sword into the air as Kichio watched. Naruto took the opportunity to leap forward and threw a flying glove at the fingers holding the mace. The rocks shattered and Kichio lost control of his weapon, trying to get it back before it fell. He looked up to see Naruto jump up and grab the knight's sword and hold both weapons close to his body. Crushing saber winds. Naruto unleashed a flurry of slashing blows as he tore deeper into the already existing marks he had left on the golem's neck. Debris and dust flew from his blows as the boy let out a triumphant roar, slicing off Kichio's arm and lopping off the guard's head. The stone helmet rolled to the floor as Naruto took a moment to breathe. He watched his handiwork as the great body of rock fell to its side, the loud voice it had once projected no longer ringing in his ears. Naruto looked at the lifeless head with some regret. He knew that this strange type of stone had no real choice whether to defend this place or kill. But he had to go ahead and complete this mission. He promised Jura he would. Naruto closed his eyes and nodded to his former opponent. I am sorry. Well. Ah. Naruto jumped back in fear at the sudden shrill voice that echoed through the room. He looked down at the helmet that had rolled a foot away from him. Slowly and carefully he moved his feet towards the rock armor. He tapped the stone lightly with the side of his foot. Please stop. Naruto stared at the helmet with his jaw dropped. How the hell are you still alive? I cut off your fucking head. Naruto yelled angrily. Because I am a rock, don't you see? You can't kill a rock. That actually makes a lot of sense. Naruto nodded as he considered this fact. He dug his swords into the ground as he walked over to the talking head and sat down facing it, rearranging Kichio so that he faced forward. So, what are you going to do now? I don't know. I never considered what I would do if I were defeated. I always pictured I'd stay here picking new pranks until I left work. I suppose it's something you could do. You can stay here and wait until you turn to dust. Naruto said as he tried to think about leaving this strange thing here until the end of time. He mumbled a little and then his eyes widened in realization. Hey, have you ever thought about joining a guild? What the hell is a guild? That. Haven't you heard of a wizard's guild before? I have been living under a rock for 400 years, there are many things I don't know. Right, Naruto said as he nodded in agreement. Well, a guild is a place where a bunch of weirdos and freaks can come together and take requests and teamwork. Maybe there is a perfect guild for you. Kichio stood there as he hummed aloud in agreement. It looks a little weird, but interesting, but I can't move anymore, so I don't think I will join a guild. Naruto got up off his knees and stood up. Okay. Once I finish taking out all those nice guys, I'll make sure to pick you up and drop you off somewhere. I'll show you what the outside world is like. He came closer and started pulling his swords out of the ground. No escape. Naruto looked over his shoulder and lowered his gaze to the inanimate talking helmet. This place was built so that no one can get out. The walls and door are so strong that no ordinary wizard should be able to take them down. When they take those swords, this place will call and kill anyone who find there. A failed test to make sure no one unable to handle their power will leave with them. This place is not eligible. Naruto picked them out with calm his swords and examined them. He sent one back to his requip and extended his prosthetic arm. Hey, what's your name again? The statue was silent for a second as he tilted his gaze at the boy. Kichio. Well, Kichio, you should know that I've been stuck in more places like this before. No exit. There is no escape. Made to think that you no longer have a chance to leave. But believe me, he turned away and gave the helmet a confident smile. I've always found a way out. And you'll be able to see what the real world is like, believe me. He gestured behind him as the blonde boy ran down the hall, following the Ronin. He had escaped earlier. Kichio was left leaning against the wall, unable to move, chase, fight or leave. He would be lying on the ground for the rest of his life. There's not much difference from before. Okay. Where did I left it? Correct. 3,245,649 beer bottles on the wall. 3,245,649 beer bottles. Take one off. Pass it. You have 3 million. Naruto ran forward as fast as he could, his sword firmly at his side. He had no idea how far they had come, or how far he had to go. But from what Kichio had said, they weren't leaving anytime soon. Curse. Well, look what we have here. We waited in the back to deal with the damn rock, but we got a little surprise instead. Naruto slowed and stopped carefully at the sound of his arrogant voice. Approaching by the light of the flickering fires, 2 sets of footsteps came casually towards him. One of them was a middle-aged blonde man with his hands respectfully behind his back. Strapped to his shoulders was a long black spear with a razor-sharp end. Beside him was a tall man with dark hair and a grin who was giving the young man a dangerous smile. Strapped to his back was a large axe that was probably larger than the boy's height. He came forward and scratched his chin, laughing maniacally. Hey, old Kyuzin. Have you ever thought in a million years that we would have to face the little boy instead of the noisy magical guardian built to protect this place? The older one shook his head. No, I never believed this child would be victorious in a grudge match against such a creature. It shows that we may have underestimated this child's true capabilities. Yeah, or maybe that guardian was much weaker than we thought. The axeman, Zihao, said condescendingly. Yes, the spear user, Kyuzin, smiled grimly at the prospect. Maybe it was. The axe-bearer threw back his head and laughed maniacally with his hand over his eyes. He calmed down and let out a few giggles from time to time. Well, I guess we can see if this boy is good for us, huh? He turned to the boy and pointed at him. Listen, boy. The blonde boy was already a short distance from the axe-bearer, glaring at him coldly as both Ronin were completely taken aback by the boy's speed and movement. Naruto swung the blade up and down at Zihao's chin. The axe user backed away desperately, narrowly missing the point of the knight's sword. But Naruto used that momentum to turn and plant a hard kick in the tall man's stomach, causing him to cough up bile and grunt in pain. The fairy tale wizard used the Ronin as a jumping pole and shot towards the older blonde. Zihao launched several feet from the force of the attack. Kyuzin retaliated by pulling the weapon off his back and grabbing it with both hands, stabbing the sliding blonde. Naruto stabbed Excalibur into the ground and used the sudden change in speed to twist his spear and close in on his enemy. Naruto used one foot to deflect the spear out of its way and raised the other high above his head. Before Kyuzin could even look up to see the attack, Naruto struck him with an axe in the skull. The older blonde fell straight to the ground, his face crashing into the sidewalk as his eyes went white. Naruto landed on his feet and looked at the defeated warrior. He heard the sounds of heavy stomping coming from behind him and instinctively rolled to the side. He barely dodged a huge axe blade that sliced through his torso as he slid away from the attacker. Zihao looked at the boy with angry eyes. Anger would explode and boil between his teeth, drool trickling down his chin. He snatched the massive axe from his shoulder and raised it above his head, the anger in his eyes turning to eagerness to tear the boy apart. Naruto continued to spring back with determination, missing the end of the great blade by inches as Zihao continued to swing it like mad. The big man wielded the heavy weapon like a mace, swinging it in a flurry of slashing blows as if it were weightless. And as he advanced on the mustachioed young wizard, he left no chance for retaliation. All the boy in black could do was retreat or face the end of him. Naruto stopped backing away, holding his ground as the axe swung down to his left side as Zihao grinned wildly. He saw Naruto uselessly raise his left arm in an attempt to block him, but the attacker had no such desire. He completed his swing, preparing to drop a geyser of blood, an agonized scream, and a chunk of severed flesh to the ground. But after Zihao brought down the axe, he watched in amazement as he saw the boy's left arm gleaming and reflecting the light from the torches around him. The blonde just stared at him with his own smirk as he stepped forward and plunged the hilt of his sword into the man's stomach. As the axe user doubled over from the force of the blow, Naruto raised his left hand and cut off the axe handle. Zihao staggered back, holding his stomach as he frantically stared at his broken weapon. He looked up just in time to get a kick across his face. He flew backward off the ground, eyes completely white and blood pouring from his nose. He bounced to the ground several times before falling backwards, unconscious. Naruto spun in the air and landed on his feet effortlessly. He smiled and looked at the two men he had taken aback. Do you still want to discuss my abilities or do you just want to take your quiet nap? He waited silently for an answer, but none of the men impressed him. That's what I thought. He was so happy that he trained with Gildarts and Natsu when he got the chance. Gildarts because he got used to fighting bigger and stronger opponents by targeting their weaknesses in combat, not that it helped anyone against him. And Natsu because he had also gotten used to taking advantage of the momentary openings left by those who scolded or talked too much. Naruto walked over to the unconscious blonde man and picked up one end of his spear. He covered his foot with armor and split the weapon in half, rendering it useless. Throwing it aside, Naruto looked at the side he had used to catch the axe user off guard and saw that his sleeve had been torn to shreds. He grabbed the ripped material and removed it, revealing his dentures in the entirety of him. He picked up Excalibur and slung it over his shoulder, easier to carry as he ran down the corridor again. Naruto ran further and further down the path towards the central structure. And he noticed that drawn or carved on the walls were elegant writings of a horde of dragons. He slowed, inquiring about the ancient markings that dotted the corridors, lit by flaming torches. They told some kind of story. The first paintings he saw were of hundreds of dragons, flying high above the skies of Earthland. Below them were houses and buildings, belonging to men who worked in the fields. Then half of the dragons started attacking people on the ground, breathing out what felt like fire to burn humans and their homes. While the other half of the dragon horde seemed to charge the attacking half, preventing it from advancing any further. It looks so good, doesn't it? Naruto stiffened and held Excalibur in a defensive stance. He listened to the happy steps and bounced closer to his position. She saw a shorter and older blonde boy appear. He was happily stunned and flashed a smile as pure as sunlight. Naruto didn't know why, but this boy's smile made him sick. What's cool? These dragons. Duh. Look how fantastic they are. The boy said, opening his arms and looking at all the drawings on the wall. I keep looking at these things, thinking how good it must have been to be alive with dragons. He lowered his arms but kept that glint of wonder in his eyes as he looked over the wall. I heard long ago that they were the strongest beings in the whole world. The kings of the skies, lands and oceans. And they were unbeatable. Even the strongest wizards of the time couldn't even scratch them. The young Ronin looked at the boy with the strange marks on his face. Can you imagine? An unbeatable monster that can destroy anything in its path? It would be nice to find something like that. He looked at his hands with a crazed look. Fight them. To cut them into pieces. I so want to fight one of them. His entire body quivered with eager excitement. Ah, that's where the bad feeling comes from. Naruto lowered his weapon but didn't let his guard down. Are you going to keep fantasizing about animals or what? You're part of the Ronin gang, aren't you? The boy realized he had moved away and started scratching his neck and laughing embarrassed. Ahihi, sorry. I've strayed a bit. He dropped his hands to his sides and smiled at Naruto. My name is Dee. And yes, I am a Ronin. Dee, huh? The young fairy mage looked at the boy in front of him. He wore the same black suit as the other two Ronin, but much smaller in comparison. And he also had chains around his chest, probably hooked to his back. Aren't you too young to be part of this kind of gang? What? No way. Dee protested, starting to jump like a child throwing a tantrum. I may be young, but I'm very strong, seriously. Pointing to himself, he said in a voice filled with pride, I've killed dozens of people and have been recognized by. How else could you do such a thing if you're not strong? Naruto continued to stare at the boy, narrowing his eyes slightly at the ease he had in stating that fact. It's not something to be proud of. Dee just pouted and blew a raspberry into the pooper. Say it. Ao-chan said that you need a lot of power and the will to kill to become strong. And I will only be stronger when I have one of those dragon swords. But you already know, Don Tu, Ni? Chan. Naruto gave him a questioning look as Dee smiled again. You won the good guardian, Kyuzan-chan and Zihao-chan. You must have killed a lot of people to become so strong. Much stronger than them, right? Naruto's gaze deepened as the young Ronin said this. He raised his sword against the bloodthirsty boy. Enough. I'm done with this shit. Get out of the way now. Dee laughed happily as he leaned over his shoulders and pulled out his gun. He held the scythe in one hand and balanced the metal weight of the chain with the other. He gave Naruto another one of his perpetual smiles. He. It's not safe to point such sharp weapons at you, Ni-chan. I just told you. Naruto got into a ready stance and readied himself for his attack. I am strong. Naruto felt his eyes widen in surprise at his voice appearing just behind him. He jumped forward, trying to make space between himself and the grinant boy who somehow wandered him. Dee lowered the scythe, but Naruto raised Excalibur and closed the weapon in a sparks shower. But he didn't have time to dodge the iron weight being manipulated in the Ronin's other hand. Naruto looked up as the weight fell on the sword, straight at his head. Deputy Commander Ronin walked carefully down the corridor to his lord's pace as they passed all the paintings. But while Aomon was only interested in the treasure at the end of the road, Rang found himself engrossed in the story of the dragon's past. The story of a war between dragons that ravaged the world and left it barren. Like some dragons came to humans for help and forced them to use some kind of magic. And then, the humans were the ones who fought the dragons and apparently won. Rang, hurry up. You're falling behind, said the man with the ancient black sword as he waited for his former servant. I'm sorry. Aomon-sama, the swordsman with 5 swords, ignored the rest of the dragon's story and once again followed his master. My lord? Yes, what is it? I'm not sure we made the right decision in splitting up into groups like this, sir. Leaving Kyuzan-sama and Zihao-sama together in the same place is like leaving a wolf and a tiger in the same cage. And Dii-sama is far too inexperienced to fight by himself with no restraint. Letting our comrades fight whoever won the battle is. Rang? The swordsman's servant stopped speaking and looked up at his master. Yes, sir? Did I ask your opinion? He glanced over his shoulder and gave the older servant a cold look. If those cretins lose to that golem, then they will never be worthy enough to follow my shadow. He looked ahead again, his devilish grin growing as he saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I just need the best to help me take control of the swords. Rang softened his eyes, worried by the distant tone that his master was assuming with the lives of others. Teacher. Aomon ignored his servant's concern and concentrated only on the final result. I'll get the swords first. So, I'll find Heartfilia. I will destroy that bastard's house. I will kill all his servants and companions. And I'll make sure you get a front row seat while I skin your little girl alive like she's an animal. The commander and his lieutenant walked towards the light of the central vault. All around him were treasures and gold filling the huge building resting underwater. As far as the eye could see, there were paintings, gold coins, and jewels. From floor to ceiling, there were more and more murals depicting the end of the Dragon Civil War. But that didn't matter. The Bunce's former heir ignored all the riches and money, looking only at the prizes on the lower deck. Set in 7 stone scabbards were 7 exquisite blades, each with their own patterns and designs, emitting a power presence like no other. Aomon smiled as he watched the fruits of his efforts. And then, the world. Naruto slid back to the ground, giving him the space he desperately needed from the psychotic boy. He lifted his head, blood pouring down his scalp and all over his face. But he never lost his fearless gaze at the laughing boy as he twirled the weight in his hand with excitement. Ha ha ha, you are so amazing, Ni-chan. It usually works to defeat everyone else. You were really cool. Naruto nonchalantly wiped some blood from his face with his hand and looked at him. How the hell did you do that? Dii tilted his head but kept the smile. Do what? Did you know? Naruto got up from the ground and prepared to fight. How did you follow me so fast? He waited while Dii realized what he was talking about and smiled even more. Oh. That. Hee. Dii stepped forward and appeared once again right in front of Naruto. Naruto snapped his teeth and placed the sword between the scythe and his neck. But the younger Ronin lifted the chain and wrapped it around the older boy's neck, locking him as he brought the iron weight back onto his head. But this time, Naruto raised his left arm over his head and blocked the weight completely, causing a loud clang to echo through the hallway. Naruto stretched out the chains and stepped away from Dii. Dii jumped back and gripped her Kusarigama tightly. My magic is called Flash. I use my magic to shorten the distance between me and my target so I can jump over them at super speed. As a demonstration, little Ronin appeared on the wall alongside Naruto, using it as a step while throwing his weapon like a slingshot. Just as Naruto blocked the attack, another one came at him from behind. He rolled away in an attempt to escape, but the Flash Boy was on the roof, pinning down as the weight cracked into the concrete. With each attack he blocked or counterattacked, another was already launched at him from behind. And more. And more. Dii laughed like a clown as he looked at the older boy who seemed to be struggling with his movements. After a while, his weight began to rub against his skin and his scythe began to leave shallow cuts. Ha 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 ha. Being able to move and attack at such speeds is proof that only a genius could use this power. I've killed so many soldiers, mages and fighters this way that I've truly lost count. It's scary, isn't it? Right? Isn't that so, Ni-chan? To face someone so terrifying. He appeared over a slumped Naruto with his scythe above his head, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. To face someone so strong. Dii coughed up saliva. He was so stunned that he couldn't even tear himself away from the blind punch he had in the ribs. Finally Dii fought back and jumped back, breathing heavily as she looked at the boy's back who hadn't even turned to fight back. He saw Naruto slowly turn over his shoulder and look at him. You are fast. Not strong. He said it clearly as it sounded like he just accomplished something. Dii's eyes widened before he hissed through his teeth. What did you say? I just realized what kind of fighter you are. Naruto rose from his knees and twisted his neck and shoulder. sending his blade into his requip and leaving him disarmed. You are a hit-and-run fighter. I used to do stuff like that too when I was up against guys who completely outclassed me. When he thought about him, he thought of a certain old bastard with an eye patch. D looked totally surprised by his statement. What is? You are very fast, but this is to compensate for the fact that you don't have much physical strength, right? You kept jumping to attack from my blind spots and avoid a full frontal attack. Because your shots were very fast but didn't deal much damage. He looked at his clothes and touched the parts where he had been hit. If I hadn't defended myself, they would have started to pile up and it would have been worse. D was shaking uncontrollably, his eyes hidden by his matted hair. He looked at Naruto with pure contempt. Don't talk like you're the best. I've faced countless fights against weak people like you, and I've never lost a single match in my entire life. Not even once. Naruto looked at him in shock before narrowing his eyes sternly. So how the hell are you going to learn anything? He cried aloud as D was taken aback. You will never learn anything and you will never become stronger if you win for life. You fight. You lose, you train. You fight. You win. Here's how it works. Naruto blinked in surprise before rubbing his chin in satisfaction. Ah, is that what they call Gita Major? Perhaps this is what happens when you gain enough experience to teach your young ones. Ah ha ha. He laughed as he scratched the back of his neck. D appeared in front of him, ready to slit his offending throat. But Naruto just stared blankly and stopped the attacks in the bud. D started hitting him desperately from all sides, trying to prove him wrong. But every time the attack got close, Naruto would pull away or back away. I'm strong. I'm strong. I'm strong, damn it. And now that you're angry, you've given up your only advantage. Naruto telegraphed a punch to D's face, causing him to panic and jump back to give him space. Naruto waved his hand and looked at the younger boy. You're not the only one who's been in a life or death battle. D furiously grabbed her Kusarigama and screamed in despair. Visions of an abused boy fighting for his life in a horrific environment covered in cult blood. And kill every member there to survive, even through their own excruciating pain. He flashed to charge forward and threw the iron weight with everything he had. Shut up. Naruto ran up and stopped the iron weight, the chain reverberating back. Naruto grabbed him and yanked him, wrapping the chain around the young Ronin's arm as he tried to free himself. I bet you'll be very strong when you grow up. But maybe you should try to find something better to fight for than killing just for fun. Naruto smiled as he squeezed the iron weight in his left hand. So let me be the one to put you on that path. He pulled with all of his strength, lifting D off the ground and into the air. Naruto jumped up and grabbed the young blonde by the face. He dropped down and prepared to plant the boy's head in the concrete. He stamped his feet and held the young man's head an inch from impact with the ground. Naruto carefully placed the wide-eyed boy on the ground as he picked up the chained weapon and separated it. What did you do? Naruto looked at the boy temporarily dazed as he gave him a shaky look. I scared you with the feint I just did. Making you panic, get angry, lose control and nearly smash your head in. It put you in shock. You still can't move, can you? D tried to raise his arms, but found that his whole body was covered in rocks. He cocked his head and looked at Naruto, shaking. It'll probably fade in a while. Don't worry. D threw his head back and looked at the ceiling. I don't think I like losing. Naruto nodded and started fumbling with the broken weapon. Yes, nobody does. That's why you have to keep getting stronger. Is that how you became strong, Ni-chan? Naruto gave her a thoughtful smile and nodded. Yes. When we were together I won and lost many fights with my friends. And when I started learning magic, I fought a monster and lost this arm. She greeted the boy with his prosthetic. But I didn't want to just sit in place and worry about how I lost. So I've been getting stronger and stronger ever since then to make sure I don't lose. I haven't won every fight since then, but I've definitely improved. I think Raing-chan is super strong too. Naruto blinked and looked at the boy with a questioning expression. He is my senpai in Ronin. He taught me to fight with my scythe and my weight. He probably saw that I wasn't strong enough and taught me never to face my enemies. Naruto leaned against the wall and listened as the boy told him about the last remaining Ronin. Raing-chan is probably the best swordsman I know. Like one of those samurai, and he is fast, strong, and very good with a sword, and it's much better than Zihao-chan, Kuzan-chan and me, so be careful. D looked at the ceiling and seemed to get a little gloomy. But Ao-chan, it's really scary. He's not as good a fighter as the rest of us, but when he uses his sword. The entire structure shook violently, causing Naruto to trip and try to keep his balance. They heard the sound of scraping stones and the sound of water. The walls began to crack and crack, spraying water at high speeds while the boys were soaked. D coughed up some of the lake water as it had already started to puddle on the ground. What's going on? Naruto looked towards the central vault. He wiped his mouth and growled angrily, remembering Kichio's warning about the security system. Bastards. He grabbed Dee by the back of his uniform and pushed him against the wall, leaning him against it as he started running towards his next target. He waited patiently for his enemy to arrive as he stood at attention by the cracked and dripping wall. This was what his family had taught him since he was a child. The elegance of waiting. To get the most out of your efforts, and always listen to your teacher. He came with the job of being in the family of employees serving the Bunce family for several generations. Raing had always listened to what Aomon-sama asked and demanded. Since they were both children, he had always been a devoted servant. And even now, when the Bunce family fortune was gone, Raing did not abandon his duty to follow his master's orders. And now, as his master was retrieving the desired weapons and destroying this structure in the process, it was the servant's duty to stop his opponent. Raing shifted and angled the 5 scabbards attached to his body to make them easier to remove. This would be where all the years of sword training would come to light. The tall dark-haired man heard the sound of footsteps flying across the hall. He backed away from the wall and stood in the middle of the path, ready for his opponent. His footsteps splashed in the water that had already begun to reach his ankles. Out of the darkness, the mustachioed young man stepped out into the light of the still burning torches. Naruto slowly and carefully took a step forward and stopped in front of the taller, older man. The Ronin cocked his head slightly at the younger man who was panting softly. "I've been waiting for you to come. Do we resolve this matter quickly or can we discuss a peaceful solution to this problem?" Naruto didn't seem to recognize what the older man had said and just continued to stare. "You are different." Raing only seemed to blink a few more times to show that he was confused by the statement. "What do you mean?" Naruto kept his body free but continued to look at the Ronin. "You are much stronger than all the other Ronins you left behind. You didn't let your guard down even when I wasn't here. I knew that if I tried to ambush you from here, you would thwart him. And you're not like the other guys either. You're not so crazy that you can't see me as a threat. Of course I see you are strong. I knew the moment you blocked Kichio-sama's attack that you were a worthy opponent that we could fight against. Due to the fact that I couldn't hear the Guardian yelling behind us, I had a strong estimation that you were the one who would make it here." The gentle Ronin said almost in a low voice as if it didn't matter at all. "Also, thank you for praising my skill. It is a great honor to receive a word of praise from someone who has already won so many fights." He bowed respectfully to the stunned young man before him. He stood up and took a deep stance, gripping the hilt of the blade tied to his left side. "As such, I will challenge you to the best of my ability." Naruto was stunned because he couldn't believe what was happening. After all the madness of parting lakes, talking rocks, murder weapon users and bald wizards, somehow this was the strangest sight of the day. Such a respectful and noble swordsman was praising his enemy one moment and then ready to fight him the next moment. Naruto couldn't figure out what the correct action choice was here. He raised his hands and motioned for her to calm down. "Very well. Let's take a moment to." The swordsman appeared within an arm's length of the boy, face to face with him. His eyes were hard and resolute as Naruto's widened in shock. He gripped the handle tighter and pulled it in an arc. Iijutsu. Calming crescent moon. Naruto jumped as fast as he could with the armor covering his feet. But even with the improved strides, Naruto barely kept the blade from making a shallow gash across his chest. As Naruto staggered backwards from the sudden movement, he looked up to see that the Ronin had already repositioned itself and this time was spinning in the air with 2 blades. Naruto panicked and summoned his swords to block the blow, barely stopping his incredible power. The fairy mage was forced back, sliding against the water and the ground as she held her swords up to block the incoming attacks. Like a relentless storm, the Ronin struck their blades with overwhelming skill and technique. He spun, lunged, stepped back, and attacked as if it were as easy as breathing. Even as more retaining walls began to collapse and drench the 2 men, he didn't stop attacking. The swordsman parried the younger boy's counterattack and leapt to his feet, striking his chest. Naruto jumped back and barely avoided the kick, but then saw the man jump up and throw 2 shorter swords in his face. The 2 blades were dug into the ground as Naruto's feet kicked up the water from his retreating motions. He was on his knees and breathing rather heavily when the man stepped forward and crouched, snatching the 2 small swords from the ground and holding them between his fingers. "You are truly a man of great skill. Never before have I faced so many with as much instinct and agility as yours. And drawing your swords after so many attacks reveals the truth of your strength." Naruto looked at the older man, his blood dripping from the long cuts on both cheeks. It was difficult for him to react in time to the blows and movements of the more experienced swordsman. His extremities ached and his breathing was starting to get more irregular. Naruto understood what that meant, of course. He was getting too tired. All the ongoing fighting, blocking Kichio's attacks and dodging Dee's attacks have been building up after all this time. He still had a lot of strength reserved, but he wasn't in the best shape, and he wasn't in the best shape to fight such a skilled swordsman. Naruto let out a soothing sigh and got to his knees, holding both swords tightly in his hands. The Ronin looked at the boy's swords and seemed to realize something. He turned carefully, but slowly came out of his expert fighting stance. "Tell me, where did you get those blades?" The young man with the mustache looked at the blades before turning back to the man. "Does it matter?" "Very much. Those swords are..." He stopped arguing and shook his head, regaining his stoic demeanor. "It does not matter. It doesn't matter how you came across those swords anymore." He drew a fifth blade from another sheath strapped to his abdomen, a wakizashi. "My name is Rang Hu. Faithful servant of the Buns family. And if you don't tell me how you found those swords, then I'll get them for you." He put the hilt of the medium-sized blade into his mouth. He grabbed both the katanas and the tanto in his hands. To his right, the katana was held correctly with the tanto in a reverse grip on it. And to his left, the katana was held in the reverse grip with the tanto facing forward. He crouched, legs spread out wide as he kept his gaze fixed on the blonde. Others would have thought this man was a ridiculous fool with his choice of fighting style and stance. But Naruto could tell by the killing intent he was unleashing and the firmness of his blades, even the one in his mouth, that he was no amateur. He crouched into his dual-wield position, one sword in front while another was held slightly above him behind him. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Wizard of Fairy Tale." The two swordsmen stood facing each other, without making the slightest movement. Even if the walls kept collapsing and filling the hall with water from the lake. As the water began to reach their shins, the men carefully lowered their stances. The ceiling cracked and a spray of water poured out, hiding them from each other's sight. And on that occasion, both lunged forward and cut their blades across the swift current. Driven back by the power of the blows, both men lunged again, swords gripping. Naruto forced himself to maintain the stalemate as he gave the older man a weak smile. "I can't feel any magic coming from you. Are you trying yet? Are you insulting me?" He laughed uncertainly as the blades screeched against each other, sparks flying in all directions. With very little difficulty, the man spoke into the hilt in his mouth. "I'm not going easy on you. Unlike the other members of the 44 Ronin, they are unable to use any form of magic. But what I lack in magical ability," he pushed the swords away and charged, "I am more than compensated with my swords." Rang rushed forward and sent a flurry of blows at the shorter boy. With each blow, Rang adjusted so that their blades swung and almost stabbed the boy with the spare blade. Naruto was barely dodging with best efforts against the overwhelming skill and speed Rang was using to fight, forced to use his prosthetic as protection against some of his blows. Neither combatant was deterred by the dilapidated surroundings or flooding water, focusing only on the enemy in front of him. As they traded blows and swung their swords so fast that only fuzzy flashes were visible, Rang reached out and slid the blade through his mouth towards the young man's eyes. Naruto instinctively jumped back, but the Ronin knocked him off balance. Rang sent a knee to his stomach and Naruto blocked it by deflecting it with his elbows. But with that opening, he made a deep cut on the boy's right shoulder. Rang stabbed one of the tanto in the leg of the shorter boy, causing him to scream in pain. He tried to pierce the other under his ribs, but Naruto's pain was turning him blue and he snapped the short blade before it could cut him. When his sword snapped, Rang leapt to his feet and planted both feet against the boy's chest. In an incredible showdown, the swordsman Ronin kicked Naruto in the chest, sending him flying down the corridor. He bounced off the ground and stood in the water for a moment, breathing heavily as he dropped his swords. Blood oozed from the cuts and around the small sword still stuck in his leg. He forced herself to lift him head and look back at the man as he effortlessly balanced his swords in a comfortable grip. "You are indeed a skilled warrior at your age, but I think I surpass you in swordsmanship. And even without the ability to use magic, I believe I'm one of the strongest members of the 44 Ronin." Rang said without a hint of arrogance or overconfidence in his tone. It was as if he was just giving fair warning. "You can't beat me like a swordsman." Naruto moaned in pain as he rose to his knees with a shaky grip, looking down as the water from the lake filled the corridor more and more. He reached out and grabbed Kusanagi with one hand while holding Excalibur with the other. He was silent for a moment as the Ronin watched in silence, running water playing in the background. "You are right." Naruto sent both exquisite blades back to his requip slot as his hands were washed clean by the water. "I'm not a strong enough swordsman. Not yet anyway. I can't beat you like this. Not with my swords." Rang kept an impassive gaze on the boy while he seemed resigned to the fact. He closed his eyes in relief. "But do you think that matters?" Rang opened his eyes and looked at the boy who was on all fours and trembling. But not because of pain or fatigue. From anxiety and constancy. "I don't need to call myself a swordsman. Or a Ronin." He grabbed the tanto on her leg and shook it, gritting his teeth as some blood spurted from the wound. "I don't need to be a hero. Or a ninja. I am not a slave. Or a Jinchuriki. And I don't even have to be a demon. Because I know what I am." He crushed the tanto in his hand as he stomped and heaved. He looked at the man with 3 swords with an indomitable spirit in his eyes. "I'm the fairy tale hunter. I'm a wizard. He roared defiantly as he got into a fighting stance, ignoring the state of his body as his soul seemed on fire, and neither you nor anyone else is going to change that. Rang silently stared at the boy as he gasped slowly at his wounds. He had seen many other fighters, warriors and wizards urging them not to give up like that, but they didn't continue, succumbing to their fear, hurt or simply unable to cope with the stress of the fight. But he didn't feel any of that hesitation from the boy in front of him. He truly believed that he could continue to fight the Ronin even without the use of swords. Rang could tell all this just by looking into the young man's eyes. In his entire life he had seen only 2 other people capable of diving into the storm without faltering. He decided to fight the young wizard to the best of his ability. Just because he'd lost 2 of his 5 swords didn't mean he was any weaker without them. So why did this have to translate the same way for the bare-knuckle fighter? He crouched into a solid stance with both swords traveling in a line, pointing at the blonde teenager. They both stood still as they waited for another opening as before. Only this time Naruto didn't waste a moment reeling and lunged forward, kicking up the water with his mighty stroke. His forward charge went straight to the wall to the Ronin's right and he used it as an observation post to ambush his flank. Rang raised his arm and blocked most of the diving kick with his biceps, grunting with the effort of the magically forced attack. He snatched the mustachioed boy from his arm and ran across the ground, waiting to attack his descent. He waited to slit the boy's throat, but Naruto channeled his magic into his fists and sent 2 strikes to the ground, keeping him standing long enough for the sword to miss and cut some of his hair. Naruto landed in a handstand and began spinning on his palms, driving one kick after another at the defensive swordsman. He continued his flurry of blows as the 3-bladed swordsman pinned them beautifully. The wizard knew the Ronin had the edge in skill and range, but he had power and strength. If he could get close, this match would be fair. Naruto got to his feet and took a step back as Rang started throwing well-coordinated cuts into his openings. His feet continued to splash against the rising water as Rang lunged forward and slowed his pace, startling Naruto as both katanas closed in on him. The attack hit and forced the water around him to fly backwards. Rang kept his composure even though Naruto was using magic around his bare hands to lock the blades to within an inch of contact. Naruto growled and slapped his swords away, clenching his fists and taking the opportunity to strike back. The 2 traded blows, dodging attacks and blocking blows evenly. Where Rang outclassed him in swordsmanship, Naruto more than made up for it in hand-to-hand combat. He parried a blow with the back of his hand and moved quickly into the swordsman's arm space. He threw a punch but Rang moved his head, cutting a superficial wound on the arm of the boy with the wakizashi in his mouth. Naruto took the opportunity to jump up and knee the Ronin on the chin, stunning him and crushing his mouth with the hilt of his sword. As he staggered backwards and the sword fell from his blood-soaked mouth, the mustachioed boy turned and snatched one of the katanas from his hand. When he regained his balance and grabbed his head to keep his eyes still, he looked down and saw the boy take up an attack position inside his arm. Naruto had his fist glued to his side and used his other arm to block the sword thrust above his head. He gathered as much magical power as he could into his palm and buried it in the Ronin's stomach. His power flared up and the swordsman slowly stood up, eyes wide and a little blood pouring from his mouth. Push the palm of the storm. Rang was flung backwards at immense speeds, bouncing off the water in the corridors as he approached the vault entrance. Naruto followed the effect of his attack and ran through the corridors to the end of the corridor. The leader of the Ronin group was placing each of the powerful elemental swords next to each other in the space of his jacket. He ignored the sound of water pooling at the bottom of the huge crypt as he concentrated only on holding his prize in place. He folded the arms of his jacket and tied them together, forming a backpack suitable for carrying weapons out of this shrine. He threw his bag on his shoulder and started walking in silence in the space of the vault, looking over the writing and the treasure that was hit by the water of the lake. Gold and history no longer worried. He knew that such wealth was fleeting and there was only one true way to maintain an empire that would last forever: force. He tilted his head all the way back to see the top of the building's spire. And around the walls were notches and ladders in the building to help you get to the top. He couldn't help but laugh a little at the stories of the inevitable place. As no man shall see the light of day again should he enter the dragon's lair. He slowly gripped the hilt of his legendary sword. PFTT. Maybe for the farmers. Noel. He was forced to stop thinking when he heard the sound of something crashing into the piles of gold and falling into the huge pool that had begun to form in the lower levels of the vault. Rang rose from the surface of the water, panting as he swam towards the dry structures his master stood on. Rang? What are you doing here? The former heir to the Bunce partnership questioned his servant as he stepped out of the water, still clutching one of his swords. Aomon-sama. He coughed up water and blood as he looked towards the entrance to the vault from which he had flown. You have to run now. I'll stop him. He dug his sword into the ground and dropped to his knees, using it for support to keep from falling. Aomon watched from his faithful servant at the entrance where he heard increasingly loud footsteps. A blond young man with strange marks on his face ran towards the crypt breathing heavily. He had some cuts on his face and his blood was staining his ragged and torn clothes. He looked towards the last two Ronin and said, "Hey you. Are you the boss? You were the one who drew the dragon swords and started sinking this place, right? What the hell were you thinking? You will kill us." Aomon only looked at his servant. "Raing, is this the guy who caused you trouble?" "Hey. Don't ignore me, you idiot." "Why yes, my lord. You have proven to be a very powerful adversary to fight against." But, his stomach clenched as a twinge of pain shot through his body, the previous attack far more damaging than he'd first thought. "I'll hold it off while you..." Raing, the chief who carried the swords sadly murmured the name of his servant. He looked at his kneeling, wounded butler with eyes as cold as ice. "You can't even handle a baby, can you?" Raing snapped his teeth. "Master, can I really trust you and others when you can't even handle a single wizard?" He shook his head and shrugged. "I thought that you, more than anyone else, would not let me down when I needed you." "I'm sorry, master," said the proud swordsman with a heavy head and heavy heart. "You are a samurai, aren't you, Raing? A clan of proud warriors who are never satisfied with failure. And your family has sworn servitude to mine for centuries. Yet here you are, disappointing my expectations. So how does a warrior like you make up for this act, huh?" When Aomon interrupted his speech, he started wrapping his hands around the hilt of his sword and drawing it. Raing kept a sorry but calm expression on his face as he slowly closed his eyes and squatted in the Caesar position. His former master slowly drew his sword made from the scales of a black dragon and raised it above his head. There was only one act of regret for a warrior like him after having failed his master. An act he'd learned to accept from his family's training. Death. The sword lowered, aiming at the neck of the swordsman who did not take any action to dodge, patiently waiting for his redemption. Move. Once again, he felt the young wizard's boot hit his chest, knocking him off his seat. The mustachioed boy was holding his two swords and raised them to intercept the descending black sword, but he was surprised to see that the sword had little difficulty cutting through the two metal weapons like sheets of paper. He moved in the air and barely dodged the sword that cut him. Instead, the force of sword and magic sent a powerful shockwave and a great gust of air caused the entire wall of the crypt to collapse, splitting it in two. As more water flooded the vault at a dangerously increasing rate, the writing on the wall crumbled and crumbled. Naruto rolled away and walked over to the recovering Raing, looking at the two swords that had been destroyed so easily. "Damn it. And this time I was trying to keep these things intact." He tossed the broken weapons and heard them splash around in the area he was rapidly drowning. Raing pulled up, clutching his chest painfully. But why?" "Because you were going to get killed, you idiot. I wouldn't have stood by while that happened." Raing gritted his teeth. "Never mind. A death like this is my only way to get my honor back." Naruto glared at him. "Why the hell do you have to die for something like that? It's just stupid and stupid. You don't understand. My honor is the only thing I cannot live without. And if I have let my master down in this way, then I must atone for my mistake with my life. If I cannot live with my honor, what else is there? Why live?" He dropped his usually calm demeanor and yelled at the boy standing in front of him. Until he felt the boy grab his by the neck and pull him quickly. "You are fucking alive." The goofy-eyed boy yelled defiantly at the stunned older man. "In our life we may have many opportunities to prove our worth, our honor and our strength. But you can only live your life like this once. Stupid as honor. I will not see people waste their lives like this. Not so." Naruto started to lift the tallest man over his head, "So if you want to find a way to get your honor back, then get out of here and face me on the ground." He threw the wounded man over their heads and towards the entrance. Despite his wounds, the swordsman landed on his feet and watched the two men stand amidst the collapsing landscape. He seemed to be having an internal discussion about what to do before rushing back to the entrance to the dragon's lair. Aomon stopped in front of the strange blonde boy with his Kokuryu by his side. "He wasn't very nice of you. I really wanted to die like this." "Speaking of the sword-wielding guy, doesn't mean much." He shrugged and shook his head. "Come on, I was just fulfilling her desire to abide by his code of honor. After serving me for so many years, it's the least I can do to make sure you die happy." Naruto's gaze became even sharper. If he's such a great subordinate, why does he have to die? Aomon laughed a little at the stranger's question, before he smirked and his eyes went wild and cold. "Because he let me down. Everyone is letting me down. All my life I have seen nothing but dumb and humble humans fail miserably at what they do. Service. Soldiers count my parents. All of them failures. And I want to ascend into this world, to reclaim the empire that has been so unjustly denied me. I promised everyone who followed me that I would give them strength if they used it well, but apparently none of them are up to the challenge. So what if I kill some useless drones and idiots? no damage, no miss. He barely managed to get out of the way of a walking partner and had enough strength to clear the water behind him until he filled up again a moment later. Naruto put his leg in the room and lifted it up. You know, I just realized, guys like you. He looked at the Ronin leader with a mischievous smirk. I fucking hate most things in this world. Then he turned and dodged another sword slash from the man with the legendary swords. He bared his teeth and laughed. You too. The so honest guys that interfere with everything I've worked for, just annoy me. Aomon began swinging his sword wildly in an attempt to disembowel the lithe teenager. Naruto stepped back and kept a steady distance out of reach of the sword that was attacking him. He smiled and looked at the man holding the dragon swords. I heard that sword was very strong, but you seem to wave it like a toy. Perhaps the legends about it are just out of proportion and it is just an old sword that has kept its shape. Meaning, Naruto leapt into the air and stalked over the stunned Ronin. He placed a large amount of his remaining magic into his left hand and clenched a fist, falling towards the air. Let's see how strong he really is. With all of his power, Naruto struck a devastating hammer fist at the sword Aomon used to protect himself. The clash of metals rang through the massive structure and a shockwave ripped through the air. The fluctuation of power subsided and all was calm again. Nothing. Not a scratch. The ground beneath him was cracked and chipped. The man's arm also trembled from containing the force of that attack, but the blade came out completely unaffected. A stunned Naruto was pushed back when Aomon pushed him away and thrust his arm into the chamber with a cowardly grin. Didn't it penetrate your big skull worm? Humans. Magic. Dot or nothing. Before my sword. He swung his sword at the icy fairy wizard. Dee had trouble escaping from this flooded temple. No, escape was not the right word. He was barely hobbling out of this place as he used the broken walls for support. And it didn't really help that the water had already risen to the center of his chest and was slowing it down even more. Dude, if ever there was a time to wish yourself a good swimmer, it would be when the building you're trapped in is rapidly flooding. Ah man, Ni-chan really did a number for me. This got a lot less fun real quick. The preteen heard the sound of a crash even louder and looked over his shoulder to see the faint image of water filling the entire corridor. Hee, damn it. And I told Ni-chan that I would become even stronger. Just as the young criminal had resigned himself to his fate, he heard the sound of boots crashing against solid rock. He looked up just in time to be pulled out of the water and tucked under one arm. He watched the person carrying him as he somehow didn't touch the water. Rang-chan. The samurai jumped effortlessly from wall to wall along the corridor. Hello Dee-sama. Are you okay? The man said, trying to keep his usual monotonous calm, but strangely he looked worried and reluctant. I hope you are not too hurt. Just Rang-chan a little tired. Ni-chan was much stronger than I thought. I was hit pretty hard. He laughed a little before realizing something. What about you, Rang-chan? You also fight the mustachioed Nichan, right? Did you hit him? Rang was silent for a moment as he concentrated on the task at hand. I don't know Dee-sama. He was a very strange boy. W and Ao-chan. Where is he? Don't worry about Aomon-sama right now, Dee-sama. We must concentrate on escaping this place alive. He saw the Guardian's chamber they had passed through first and jumped towards it. As he ran, he noticed the floating body parts of the two subordinates who were killed when they arrived in the separated body of the Rock Guardian they had encountered earlier. As Rang continued to run at full speed towards the first entrance, he heard a familiar voice echoing in the corridor. Damned monster. Tell me how we get out of here already. I told you so. This place wasn't built for you to run away. Kichio yelled again over the sound of the building collapsing around them. Bastard. The ancient spear-bearer tossed aside his stone helmet and watched it sink into the rising water. Damn it. Damn it. I don't eat this. Kyuzen-sama, the blonde old man, looked up to see two more members of the Ronin arriving to drown. Oh, so you two came too. Did that brat hit you guys too? He got no response from either of them, but Dee chuckled nervously. I guess. I didn't even see it coming. The little bastard was fast. Where is Zihao-sama? Just as he'd finished asking the question, the former axe-bearer emerged from the surface of the water and gasped for air. He swam to the edge of the ground. I can't open the door. The fucking thing is locked. Kyuzen cursed as he trampled the water as he rose from adding the vault breach. There was no visible way to escape from here in time before they drowned. He started panicking and hyperventilating, muttering why he decided to join this group and the mistakes he's made in the past. Bam! They heard a loud crash and felt a jolt go through the walls of the chamber. Zihao took a deep breath and dipped his head under the water to see the source of the trembling. After a moment he re-emerged and looked shocked at his companions. The door, it's broken. Let's go. Without hesitation, Kyuzen plunged into the rising water of the lake and swam desperately to the bottom. Rang slowly walked to the edge of the floor and calmly told Dee to take a deep breath, which of course followed. The four Ronin swam through the broken gate and saw a strange type of rock formation that ended at the gate but began at the edge of the lake. They followed its shape and began swimming greedily towards the surface of the lake, the structure behind them cracking and crumbling even more than before. When they finally reached the air, they took a deep breath and spat out the lake water that had filled their lungs. They crawled up the rock shape and came to the meadow they had come to. Zihao looked up to see a shadow slowly offering her a hand. I need help? The Ronin smiled and coughed some more, taking his hand to help him to his feet. Yes. Thank you for helping your superior friend. You may get a reward for your. Then he fully saw the shape of the man who was helping him. He had a round bald head and was extremely muscular. His eyes were narrowed earnestly, but his smile was slightly cheeky as three of the four Ronin gaped at him. Behind the man, several stone towers, rock formations and huge craters covered the field around him. In the center of a crater, 30 previously armed warriors were imprisoned in stone handcuffs. Each of them wounded, battered and utterly defeated. Jura gave them a confident smile. What was that as a reward, Ronin Dono? Though Raing kept his gaze calm and unperturbed, Dee looked at the Earth Mage in admiration and wonder. Exceptional. Aomon ran along the path to the top of the crypt and looked down at the destruction he had caused. A long, clean cut had crossed the vault wall diagonally. He had to find higher ground or he would be trapped under the sudden rush of the water. I guess he should keep his mouth shut. He wiped his face and looked at the ceiling. I probably overdid it a bit. I had to make a move first. He froze, realizing he was missing something. He looked around in concern as he could not find the jacket bag that contained the swords he had taken. Where is it? Where is it? Are you looking for this? He stopped and looked up to see the blond boy stop climbing and look at him with a weary smile, swinging the makeshift bag he'd stolen from the Ronin. Swords connected within the cloth as the bloodied and exhausted boy continued to climb to the top. The criminal was furious as he watched the boy wizard climb. Did this bastard have the audacity to rob me? And he even thought to gloat about it? Aomon wasted no time and started chasing him, even climbing the stone wall. He used his strong arm magic to strengthen the power of his arm and stepped back to deal another devastating blow to the blonde vine. Naruto jerked along the wall and barely avoided the pressure of the air from the swing hitting him as he smashed through the rock. Hey! You really should be careful where whoa. Dodging another slash while Aomon didn't care that he was breaking his hold, focusing only on killing the blonde above him. As most of his surroundings were destroyed, Naruto realized that keeping his weight safely on his back was slowing him down enough for the rampaging criminal beneath him to start catching up to him. And he still had a long way to go before he reached whatever was at the top of the structure. Naruto wrapped both arms around the covered swords and leapt off the wall, flying through the air for a moment before approaching the rising water below. He leapt through the air and hurled the bundle of ancient weapons upward in an arc before landing on the ledge where the ceiling met the wall. Naruto fell into the water and didn't get up right away. Aomon abandoned his fury against the blonde and concentrated again on grabbing his swords. Return them. Spray Naruto burst out of the water, screamed with a mighty roar and flew towards where the black-haired man was climbing. The Ronin barely had a chance to leap away when the boy slammed into the wall, blowing a large crater. As Aomon raised his sword to attack at close range, Naruto pulled his prosthesis out of the wall and began blocking the weak short-ranged blows. When he removed the sword and stabbed, Naruto used his left arm to run along the sharp edge and redirect the blade far from him, landing a quick blow to the stomach of Ronin and sending him fly from the wall. At the time of composing, the weakened blonde breathed as much as possible of deep breaths as he looked at his metal prosthesis in shock. All over his steel-clad arm were permanent scratches where the black sword collided with his arm. There was even a narrow groove running from knuckle to elbow. This thing had resisted breaking through stone, metal and everything in between, but a few light strokes from that sword had damaged it. As the rubble from the ceiling detached and fell into the water, the enraged Ronin leader leapt out of the pool and soared directly at Naruto. He leapt back and raised his magic-covered arms to repel the sword's edge, to no avail as a long horizontal gash appeared across both arms and drew blood from one. I will do it. He got kicked in the stomach and was sent to the other side of the facility where they were fighting. Naruto stepped out of the wall and looked up to see the assassin swing his sword again. But this time Naruto jumped along the boulder and made his way to the top of the tower, avoiding the cut and jumping off the wall. Do not lose, but while he was in the air, he was violently kicked in the back and sent to the edge of the roof. He bounced off the stone and landed on an extended platform, where he clutched his chest and coughed up blood. His vision was blurring and his body didn't react in time to react. All the fighting and wounds were finally taking over. To a shitting ant. Aomon leapt out of the tumbled rocks and flew towards Naruto like a rocket, sword outstretched to impale the mustached blonde. Naruto tried to dodge, but it was too late, pinned against the wall as the blade of the black dragon pierced his flesh, digging into his body just below his right ribs. Ah! Naruto cried out in agony as the swordsman tried to drive his blade even deeper into the boy's chest, hearing the faint sound of bones scraping against the blade. A trickle of blood ran from the edges of the blade and dripped onto the floor. Naruto hissed and grabbed the black blade with both hands, trying to keep it from digging under his ribs any further than he already had. But Aomon didn't give up and sadistically started to tilt his sword more, making Naruto wince in pain and cough up more blood. How does it feel, huh? Meet your end at the hands of a king. Can you feel the cold taking over you as the light fades from your eyes? Well, can you? He leaned forward seeing the pained expression of the boy and laughed even harder with a sadistic happy smile. K-ki-hi-hi-hi-hi-hi. Aomon looked at the boy curiously as he somehow stifled a pained laugh. K-ri? Peefed, you're nothing but a spoiled brat with cute toys. The man seethed with rage as he tried to draw his sword and cut off the boy's head to silence him. When he realized that no matter how hard he pulled, his gun wouldn't budge. Naruto's left hand gripped the blade as hard as it could, not letting it move forward or backward an inch. Naruto slowly lifted his other blood-covered hand from his sword and made a powerful fist. He gave Aomon a warm blood-stained smile and laughed. So what happens when that spoiled brat loses his toy? The Ronin panicked and dropped his sword, trying to dodge the attack, but Naruto lunged forward until he was only an inch from the man's face. I'm sorry, Ronin-sama. You failed. Naruto punched the man in the face as hard as he could, breaking his nose and knocking out several teeth. His face seemed to bend around the solid fist Naruto landed on his cup before he was sent across the building, crashing into the wall and falling unconscious to the floor. The mustachioed wizard held the blow for a moment before coughing again in pain and starting to lean against the wall behind him. He fell slowly down the wall and landed on his back, pulling his sword from the bloody tip that was lodged under his ribs. He inspected it for a moment and looked around, spotting the swords, the unconscious man, and the water level that was already a few feet away. He shrugged weakly. We better see what it is. He concluded with a smile. Jura stood patiently on the lakeshore, arms folded as he watched the continuous series of air bubbles rise to the surface from the collapsed structure beneath the lake. Hey, Baldy. What the hell are you doing? Get us out of here already. One of the 41 men behind him yelled from where he sat on the ground, waving his entwined arms in anger. Jura did nothing but look over his shoulder at the men behind him. I'm waiting for my denmate to arrive. I hope you come back soon. He ignored the sound of the men laughing hysterically at him as he returned his focus to the lake. Do you mean that child who followed Aomon? Ha ha ha, he doesn't stand a chance. The boy is probably already dead. Bet they're both dead. They're floating dead in the water the rest of the time. Ha ha ha, that's better than they deserve. The pranksters were scared out of their wits when the bald man gave them a cold, ruthless look over his shoulder. Their mouths closed with an audible snap from the strength of his intent. Mago-sama, the mighty Lamia-scale mage turned to see the only reasonable member of the Ronin conversing with him, the blonde youth at his side looking at the mage. This is a really difficult subject to discuss, but they could be right about what happened to Aomon-sama and Naruto-sama. If they didn't get out of there in time, what are you going to do? I will hand your group over to the authorities first, Ronin Dono. And then, he looked back at the lake with a determined gaze. If Naruto Dono didn't survive, then I will recover him the ruins and bring him back to his family. May he receive a proper burial, worthy of a man. The idea that his temporary partner would not survive settled in Jura's mind before a large water explosion occurred in the center of the lake. All the people on the shore watched in surprise as debris and rocks gushed out of the geyser of water. There was a flurry of bubbles pouring out as two blurry figures began to approach the surface of the lake. Naruto stepped out of the water, gasping for air and coughing up water as the black sword in his hand swung. The mustachioed wizard pulled the unconscious criminal out of the water and tried to keep them both afloat. He looked at the men on the ground. Swear. A little help. The earth wizard didn't waste a moment as he swung an arm made of rock into the center of the lake and pulled the boy and Ronin out of the water. He backed away to land and dropped them on the grass as all the other Ronin stared in shock. Naruto tossed the unconscious man aside and lay down on the grass, exhausted from all the fighting. A shadow passed over his head and he opened one eye to see Jura looking at him with a smug smile. I can't speak now. I have to fill my lungs with air. Jura noted that the boy was covered in bruises and cuts. His clothes were in tatters and he was missing a sleeve to cover his scratched prosthetic. And that even with a severe cut under the ribs like his, he had brought the man responsible for the whole fight. You did very well, Naruto Dono. Naruto looked at him and chuckled, giving him a quick thumbs up before dropping his arms. He took several breaths of fresh air as Jura dragged the leader Ronin towards the rest of the group. He smiled and sat up, partially squeezing the wound on his chest. Look what I have. Naruto focused his magic on his requip and summoned a bag with several sword hilts coming out of the top. He opened the jacket and revealed 7 different and colorful blades with their own intricate designs and styles. Jura and the Ronin looked at him in complete shock, even Renji's eyes were more open. You have blades. Naruto Dono, that's great. Despite all the chaos, were you able to take the swords with you? Naruto scratched the back of his neck and chuckled, well, they were there in a neat bunch and I couldn't resist. That's great, Ni-chan, stupid brat, bastard. Naruto chuckled and grimaced as he opened his wounds again. Jura looked at him with concern, will you be okay? Why yes, I'll be fine. He looked to where a large group of men were staring at them, except for two of them. Whoa. Did you beat them all by yourself? Yes. But they didn't have much individual strength, instead relying on their overwhelming numbers and using magic to amplify their weapons. Once I was able to separate them from their groups, they weren't much a challenge to deal with. Naruto looked at the man blankly and felt a little sweat trickle down his neck. Alarming. I think the strongest members of the group entered the temple with you, Naruto Dono. How fair was that to them? Naruto settled back on the grass and remembered all the fights he'd had there. In my opinion they were quite strong, some more than others. He heard the axe guy and the spear user snap their teeth in anger. And it was hard to fight them all when I just ran out of ki. Oh shit. Kichio. Naruto crawled down to the lake and plunged his head into the water, looking at the remains of what was once a large building. He stuck his head out and looked at his companion. Swear. You have to take me back there. I left someone there. What? Naruto tried to get back into the water, but Jura grabbed him by the neck and pulled him away from the lake. Naruto Dono, stop. The dragon's lair has completely collapsed. You can't hold your breath long enough to reach the bottom, and even if you could, no living thing could survive down there. Naruto tried to free himself from the Lamia scale mage's hold on him. I don't care, it's still, he realized something and went in the opposite direction, running towards the blades that were on the floor and looked them up and down. One of these has got to do something. Anything. Let's go. He glanced up at the Ronin and ran over to them with a pleading look. Hey, you guys know how swords work, right? You gotta tell me how they work. Everyone looked at each other and let out a sarcastic laugh. Fuck you boy. Naruto felt his forehead twitch in irritation. Okay, but just so you know, I was nice. You have imposed it on yourself. The questioning wrath of Elsa's demon. She grabbed the neck of the first man he saw. How do you use the swords? Not fast enough. He smacked him across the face and knocked him out. He grabbed another guy. What can they do? He punched him before he could start babbling. The Ronin members watch in fear as the crazy blonde boy practically starts beating up his teammates and throwing a question every couple of tries, while Jura stepped aside and shook his head in disbelief. It's blue. Naruto stopped his punch just before hitting another member of the Ronin and looked up at the dutiful samurai he had faced earlier. The man looked at him, his stoic expression still evident, then looked back at the swords. The sword of the Blue Knight. In the middle of the group. That one has the properties of the water dragon that blessed it. This is what Aomon-sama investigated about swords. Naruto looked from the man to the swords, dropping his next victim and picking up the long blue sword by the hilt. He examined it and then threw it into the lake. Nothing happened. He tried again with another powerful blow. Nothing. It does not work. Is it broken or something? He asked, worried if he broke the ancient and legendary weapons. The man shook his head. No, it's just that you haven't focused your magic on the power of the sword. Focus only on the sword, let its presence overwhelm you and become one with it. Naruto looked at the blue blade he was holding. He grabbed it slowly with both hands and closed his eyes, following the expert swordsman's advice. He felt the mere existence of the sword collide and grow with his. In the presence of his magic, the sword engulfed him as it did that man, leaving nothing behind. But from the sword devouring his magic, he felt the volume of power start to rise as he felt like he was being held up by a dragon. Jura watched in amazement as a faint glowing blue energy began to form around the shape of the blade as Naruto raised it above his head. He opened his eyes and sliced the air in front of the water. Two walls of pure water were lifted into the air as everyone backed away slightly from the force of the explosion. Jura covered his eyes from the power of the water splashing. He watched in sheer amazement at the similar sight he had witnessed earlier, water rising into the air and parting to reveal the shattered structure that lay at the bottom of the lake. And Naruto Dono, that was great. You split the lake in half. Her praise of him fell on deaf ears when she saw Naruto lying face down, prone on the ground and gasping for breath. And not anymore. 2. Tired. No magic. Naruto Dono. Your friend? Oh right. Naruto ran off the shore and slid down the rock formation Jura had created earlier to bring down the wall. When he reached the end, he jumped off and rushed towards the muddy entrance to the shrine. Jura watched apprehensively as the wall of water slowly settled back into place. Jura looked down to see that water was filling the lake just as Naruto had emerged and started up the slide. Jura brought the landslide back to the surface and put Naruto back on the grass. Got it. Ha ha ha. Naruto set down the large massive rock that was roughly the size of his chest and turned it towards Jura. Jura looked in amazement at the great helmet. What is this object? My name is Kichiyo. Jura jumped at the loud voice that bellowed from the stone helmet. Several members of the Ronin group groaned in annoyance as Dee clapped enthusiastically. Jura looked at the soaked blonde in disbelief. Naruto shrugged and smiled. This is Kichiyo. XXXXXXXXX July 8, X 779. AA amazing. Really amazing. Archaeological find of the century. The dapper-looking archaeologist looked over the top of the large stone helmet that covered most of the table it was placed upon. Around the table, senior members of the Archaeological Society poked around and looked at the helmet. A sentient, once dynamic, rock-hearing Middle Ages being. Imagine the stories. The untold knowledge and wisdom he can impart to us from his centuries of experience. Okay, so a baby seal joins a club, huh? Got it. Come on, it's a classic. The two wizards who were watching from a few feet away couldn't help but chuckle meekly at the Guardian's attempt at black humor towards the curious men. Looks like he's the topic of conversation, huh? Said the bald mage Lamia. That's why you should never meet your heroes. Said the blonde, blindfolded fairy wizard as he shook his head in disappointment. The wizards stopped in front of the ramshackle-looking entrance to the facility and kept their eyes on the outside, where the Ronin were piled into four-wheelers provided by the Rune Knights. Make sure they were in recovery distance in case any of them try to escape. Naruto-san. Swear-san. Please come here. They walked over to Jean-Luc Neville who was greeting them near the tables. When they arrived, he immediately wrapped his hands around Naruto and shook them vigorously before switching to Jura. Thank you. Once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your excellent service. There's no need for such gratitude, Neville Dono. Jura meekly protested in an attempt to calm the man. Yes, we were just doing what you asked us to do. No problem. No. What you two have done is a much greater act for this country than we thought. The man protested admiringly. Not only have you recovered the swords of legend, you have defeated a grave threat to the safety of the people, unlocked access to a tomb filled with the knowledge of the Dark Ages, and brought back to life an specimen from that period of time. WHO did you call a champion, bub? The helmet loudly protested angrily before Naruto punched his head over the head, which was pretty much all there was left of him to begin with. But really the most fascinating aspect are these swords. They are very well made and strong. The entire group gathered around 7 different swords lined up on a second table adjacent to the first. Kichiyo-san, you said you know the properties of these swords, right? Yeah. All you need to know. I could go on for hours about how everyone was done and Naruto slapped a hand where his mouth was to shut him up. Since the helmet didn't actually have a mouth, the action was quite controversial, but it did serve to silence the stone creature. Here, Kichiyo, I'll take care of it. He walked over and carefully examined each sword. Kichiyo explained to me all of his skills and stuff about him yesterday, he said. He pointed to the far left and moved to the right, telling the group his affinity for him. That was the sword of the earth. That was for fire. This was heaven. Light. Waterfall. Wind. And the last one was for shadow. He finished with the last black sheet on the table and crossed his arms. He said that each of these swords has been blessed with a portion of the original dragon's power and basic use of its abilities. Neville looked at the swords in wonder. Then he blinked and looked between the dark green blade and the blue blade. Wait, honey? Wind? Shouldn't they have the same properties? Kichiyo said that the wind blade was forged with the help of a dragon whose power is specialized in the offensive use of wind, while the sword of heaven was used to heal wounds. Even if each sword wasted as much magic as water yesterday, then good luck finding someone with enough magic to help an army on the battlefield. A sword that heals wounds? Yes. Kichiyo told me it was the only sword that couldn't hurt other people. Right? Naruto looked up at the helmet with his question. Right. The heaven-blessed blade may not cause pain or harm to those it comes into contact with. It is a battlefield weapon used to bring peace to the weary. That was what Grandeny-sama said he wanted to do the spade. Incredible. Neville carefully picked up the healing blade and stared at it in fascination. Well, I hope someday these can help people. Jura-san. A Rune Knight entered the bar and approached the imposing wizard. Jura and Naruto looked at him. One of the Ronin is requesting the other wizard's presence. The one with the blonde hair. Naruto blinked in surprise as he walked out of the bar, hotel and saw Raing standing there, his arms intertwined in real handcuffs. In the background, Naruto saw Dee being placed on the prison transporter with the rest of the Ronin. But unlike them, he had a smile on his face and happily greeted the older boy. Naruto waved back before looking at the samurai he had fought yesterday. Thanks for your help yesterday. I couldn't have saved Kichiyo without your help, so thank you. Naruto bowed to the older man who returned it without hesitation. He stood up and looked at the younger blonde. They belong to the people who saved my life. Naruto looked at him confused. Those swords you fought with yesterday belonged to two people I had once met in a village many years ago. When the Bunce Company was still a prominent firm, Aomon-sama was attacked by a group of assassins. I was only a child then, but I still tried to protect my master with my life. But before long everyone else maintains a file. But then, I saw a man and a woman appear out of nowhere, telling me to run and hide. I was still a coward then, so I couldn't help but run away. And I watched those two defeat the army of assassins as if they were swabbing flies. It was startling and terrifying, yet elegant and beautiful, all at the same time. He fondly recalled watching the pair fight assassins like child's play, tearing off their stoic mask and forming a small smile. One of them was a dark-haired man, while the other was a red-haired woman, right? Rang's eyes widened in shock and she looked at the smiling blonde. Kazuya Tsukamina and Erika Soto. They were my best friend's parents and those were their swords. Fine, you copy, but you get the idea. Rang stopped before smiling and nodding. Nearly 20 years ago I resigned myself to death, but was saved by two heroes who single-handedly carried the storm. And now, after all this time, I have been saved again. Maybe. I should find something else to fight for. Something to make my saviors proud. Rang bowed with deep respect towards the blonde. Goodbye, Naruto Uzumaki-sama. I hope one day our paths will cross again. In a more docile and friendly way, hopefully. Naruto nodded and waved as the man entered the prison transport and carried the entire group of criminals out of town. Jura approached the young blonde and caught his attention. Neville Dono reimbursed us for our services on the application. Are you sure you don't want to accept it? This reward belongs much more to you than to me. No, I'm fine. Naruto chuckled and smiled happily. I didn't take this job legally, so I'm not getting paid for it. Also, I think those are more than enough reward for something like this. Jura smiled and nodded his head, putting the $8 million in his jacket. Also, there is the matter of Kichio Dono. Despite pleas from Neville Dono and the others, he seems extremely determined to join a guild. He couldn't believe that you would offer him a fairy tale membership, but it seems like something you would do. Naruto just stared at him blankly with his huge white eyes. Yeah. By the way. He scratched his neck and looked away. I won't take it with me. That? I think he's a good kid, but my guild has enough weirdos already. Also, one of our kids just had a baby, so we can't have a golem living there. Jura looked at him worried. So where are you going to take him? Naruto kept his face completely blank and still for several seconds, before looking at the Earth Wizard with wide, pleading eyes. No. Please? No, I won't take any of your money. That's the least you could do for me. Naruto Dono, I won't take Kichio Dono with me to Lamia Scale. It's final. Naruto raised his hand in the sign of the rock and smiled. The loser must take Kichio with him. He swears contemplated. Curse. Naruto Dono was really good with rock paper scissors. Jura-san. Are we there yet? The helmet strapped around the big man's back screamed in excitement. Jura shook his head and sighed wearily. No, Kichio Dono, we're not there yet. Okay. And now? Jura could have cried at the injustice of this treatment. Naruto Dono skipped the bounty and fame, but got a much bigger reward in return. What did Jura get? Jura-san. Jura-san. Knock. It's not worth it. Naruto stood in front of the fire he had lit for the night and was completely engrossed in the task at hand. He was concentrating all his efforts on the picture forming in his mind. It took him hours to copy them because they were so much more powerful and had strong magical properties that his magic had to copy. But Naruto raised his hands and 7 different swords formed in the air. Each identical to the original dragon swords down to the last detail. He sent 6 back to his requip slot and held the green-colored sword by the hilt. He pressed the flat against his chest and channeled his magic through the blade. Much like the water dragon sword, the heaven sword expended much of its magical power just to use it. But as it began to kick in, Naruto felt his cuts and bruises begin to heal and fade. The pain from his head wound slowly faded away, leaving nothing behind. He drew his sword and noted that the wound under his ribs was still there, but lightened. He smiled and looked up at the considerably powerful magical item. It's no wonder these swords were so desirable. If you could use your magic efficiently, these swords would be incredibly useful. And he was lucky to have a partner and clients who allowed him to copy them himself. But that wasn't the biggest reward he had won from this mission. Naruto sent the green blade back to its requip slot and summoned a sword with a black sheath in its place. He looked at the sword with concern and looked reluctant as he wrapped his hand around the black hilt. Slowly he pulled the kokuryu out of his dress and looked at its flawless, lustrous black line. Naruto was lucky that he was able to hide this thing in his dimensional space, but no matter how long he tried to cover it with magic, this sword was truly magical proof. He told Jura that he had taken the blade from the Ronin leader and prepared to hand over the weapon along with the criminals. But it was the disciplined man who suggested that Naruto never let that sword fall into anyone else's hands. Even if that sword was taken by the authorities or the council, there was still a high chance that someone would steal it from there as well, and he could understand why. Holding this sword and looking at it, it seemed that it was extraordinarily stronger than ever. It was a great temptation to put him in the hands of a growing wizard like himself and normally would have caused concern. But fuck it. This was just a sword. An extension of himself that he would choose to use as a weapon, nothing else. Naruto tied the sword and its scabbard to his left side and held it tightly. He checked out the new additions to his arsenal and couldn't hide the huge shit-eating grin that spread across his face. First S-class mission finalized. Okay. This is the last time I'm going to be nice to this. Makarov yelled furiously from where he was standing at the table. His eyes were pure white with rage and veins throbbed all over his head. Besides him, Guildarts also had a rather disappointed look aimed at the young members of the guild. Which one of you took the S-class question? I'm sick of asking. All members of the new generation were gathered around a table. Each of them had their heads down and felt uncomfortable being scolded by their master. Yesterday he had discovered that one of the S-class orders he had expected to arrive had departed and he suspected that one of them had taken it. Mira gritted her teeth and shook angrily. She could not bear this treatment any longer. Ah, that's enough. Natsu, admit you stole the application and accept your punishment like a man. A. The young pink-haired dragon slayer was taken aback by the accusation. Why me? I'm not the only one who might have gotten it. It could still have been any of you. Everyone looked at him without understanding. Ah, you all suck. Natsu felt completely dejected and lowered his head, feeling the desperation of losing all his comrades in such an important moment. He felt a hand rest on his back and looked up to see Lisana smiling at him. It's all right, Natsu. If you haven't accepted it, I will believe in you to the end. Lisana, Natsu said with slightly watery eyes for the trust her friend had in him. Of course, if it turns out you took it, then I won't be able to help you. Traitor. I bet it was the girl in the armor. He had been eager to go out and take on missions like this for years, she told me herself. Elsa grabbed Mirajane by the straps of her dress and brought her face close to hers. Don't throw all this at me, Mirajane. You were thinking of asking Guildarts to take you on S-class quests too. Don't yell like that, bitch. The girls started tugging at each other's cheeks furiously for accusing each other of the crime. Kano was placing her papers in front of him and giving a reading. For the culprit. I see. Nothing but pain and anguish for its action. Damn everything. Makarov shouted as he mixed in the air. One of you is better to admit it right now. Gray left his place and looked at his teacher, Ji-san. We already told you, it was none of us. Well then. Well, if not, who took the application then? Hi guys. The whole guild looked at the voice that had appeared to the door. My cold has disappeared. Naruto was happily smiling and mixing his hand to all his friends. His clothes were very new and fresh, but his prosthetic arm was covered in deep scratches all over. He also looked extremely exhausted and had a new sword strapped to his waist. Most of the guild just stared at him with stern white expressions, as if a safe had been dropped on their heads and they could finally see clearly for the first time. Hey Naruto. Ji-chan is after us for something stupid, so get ready. Natsu yelled at his friend that he had been sick for the past few days. For everyone else, that safe in his head had opened their eyes. For Natsu, it was another blunt force trauma to add to the list. To be continued.
That's it for this podcast. Thanks for listening to this video. If you did enjoy this part of the story, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more crossover fictions. And thank you all for your help and support, and have a great day.